Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries and Ferocious Feline Productions. You know, one of the really nice things about doing the history and the mystery that history left behind of these different occurrences or locations is we get to touch on certain things that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people have never even heard of. We've talked before on the channel about the Over Mountain Boys or the Kings Mountain Boys, but we've not gone into a lot of detail of their activities during the American Revolution. Continuing on with our histories and mysteries of Tennessee, we're going to take a look at Kingsport, Tennessee, and the involvement in the Revolution by the Kings Mountain Boys. This stuff is good. Check it out.
well-equipped fighting men in a punitive expedition against the Cherokee towns, suppressing their resistance. By the 1st of October, 1776, his force was ready for the invasion of the Cherokee territory. Colonel Christian entered the Little Tennessee Valley unopposed and negotiated a truce. When Dragging Canoe refused to negotiate, Colonel Christian destroyed the towns of Great Tellico, Sitico, Mealoco, Chilhowie, and Toka. Ostenaco was the chief war leader of the Cherokee lower towns allied with the British and led attacks on Georgia, but eventually led his people west after the destruction of the lower towns. Some followed him into Cherokee-American wars with Dragging Canoe and settled with him in Chickamauga, now Chattanooga, at Utawahi, or Owl's Nest. Christian's forces left the fort and crossed Long Island, proceeding out to what would now be Horse Creek Road, encamping the first night near Chimney Top Mountain. Hearing that a force of 3,000 Indians had been mobilized at the French Broad River, Christian's forces proceeded by forced marches to that point, but upon arriving there found no enemy forces to meet them. The Indians had estimated the strength of the invading whites and feared to engage them in a pitched battle. In November, having crossed the French Broad into the Cherokee territory, Colonel Christian began laying waste the Indian villages which he found unprotected and deserted. The spirit of the Indians was broken. They had foreseen the inevitable dominion of the white man. Consequently, they sued for peace, and a truce was agreed upon which provided for a treaty council to be held at Long Island the following year. After this, Colonel Christian withdrew from the Cherokee country and returned to Fort Patrick Henry, where he disbanded his men, leaving a garrison of 600 soldiers in protection of the fort. Commissioners of Virginia and North Carolina negotiate Treaty of Long Island, Avery Treaty, which acknowledged the defeat of the Cherokees at the Battle of Long Island Flats. This opens new boundaries for settlers. July 20th, 1777, the Cherokees sought peace, making several land cessions. The Middle and Upper Cherokees, by a treaty at Long Island, ceded everything east of the Blue Ridge, together with all the disputed territory on the Watauga, Nolichucky, Upper Holston, and New Rivers. North Carolina then passed a new law authorizing a sale of 640 acres to each settler, 50 shilling per 100 acres, plus a 100 acres for his wife and each child. John Carter became the public entry taker for the counties west of the mountains. All settlers on the Watauga and Nolichucky were required to take new titles. Land grants were issued by North Carolina for land south of the French Broad and Holston, which was clearly Indian territory. That year, Colonel Martin was appointed as the U.S. Indian Agent and established a trading post on Long Island. He lived there for a decade with his Indian wife, Betsy Ward, and the island became a dock for settlers going west by rivers, then was developed as Cumberland County. Migrants would reach this area by overland travel, then building flatboats or barges to continue west by water down the Tennessee River. Such boat building stimulated the development of the community of Christianville on the north bank of the Holston and the western end of Long Island. A considerable portion of the Cherokee were hostile to the Americans and refused to be a party to these cessions. They removed westward and built new towns on Chickamauga Creek, near present Chattanooga. These Indians, under the name of Chickamauga tribes, became noted for their never-ceasing hostility. Many would side with the British at the outbreak of the war. The Cherokee, too, cast their lot with the British when the Revolution began. Nipped into action by colonial settlement on the East Tennessee land they claimed, the Indians had already moved to crush the frontiersmen in July 1776. The defenders of Eaton's Fort on high ground near Long Island sallied onto Long Island Flats at the junction of Holston's two forks, and after a bitter fight, drove the Cherokee from the field, crushing them in battle on August 20th. In 1777, the opposing factions met at Long Island to negotiate a treaty that everything east were ceded to white settlers. However, the Cherokees still maintained possession of Long Island, bringing 2 years of relative peace to the southwestern frontier. The earliest one of which there is any record was issued to Edmund Pendleton in 1766 for 3,000 acres of land on Reedy Creek. His house was where the exchange place is. One of the largest and most highly respected families were the Reyes. Joseph Rea, a Presbyterian minister, came to the Holston settlements from Maryland and was part of one of the expeditions against the Indians. The early families living on the Holston Fork were the McKinleys, Scotts, Hodges, Greggs, Torbitts, Kings, Sharps, Bledsoes, Womacs, and Looneys. Colonel William Christie lived on the south side of Reedy Creek. Long Island and much other surrounding land in the vicinity became property of Richard Netherland. When Sullivan County was established by the creation of the boundary lines in 1779, the first county seat was located at Heaton Station, on the lower slope of Eden's Ridge, or what is now more commonly called Chestnut Ridge, and about 4 miles from the present site of Kingsport. Colonel McDowell, with his Patriot forces, retreated northwestward into the mountains. This small army then divided. Shelby and Robertson went back to Watauga, and Williams took their prisoners to a place of safekeeping. And Clark, with 100 men, went south to attack Augusta, Georgia. Colonel Ferguson with his British forces stationed himself at Gilberttown, North Carolina, and sent a message by a paroled prisoner to the Wataugans that he would march his army over the mountains, burn their cabins, lay their country waste, and hang their leaders if they did not cease their opposition to the British. In late August 1780, Colonel Isaac Shelby received the message from Colonel Ferguson and immediately set out to confer with Colonel John Sevier. It was decided that they would leave the old men and young boys to guard the settlements in Washington and Sullivan counties against the Indians, gather what forces they could from Virginia, North, and South Carolina, and cross the mountains to meet Colonel Ferguson and give him battle. Meanwhile, Colonel Elijah Clark, unsuccessful in his attack on Augusta in September 1780, soon brought his soldiers and their families, about 400 half-starved men, women, and children, over the mountains to safety on the banks of the Nolichucky River. October 7th, 1780. Watauga soldiers led by Evan Shelby and John Sevier helped in defeat of British at Battle of Kings Mountain in South Carolina, where British Colonel Ferguson was killed. There was a Captain David Webb and a George Webb among the Patriot soldiers who fought at Kings Mountain. In Campbell's diary is found an entry: whereas Major T.S. Webb has been of essential importance in helping to determine and describe the route and its localities of the Kings Mountain men, the British forces were annihilated. Sevier's party then destroyed most of the remaining Overhill towns, including their capital, Chota, and the town in which the state got its name, Tennessee. John Sevier defeated Chickamauga Indians in 1782, when Chota's war chief, Aganstade, or Groundhog Pounder, or Groundhog Sausage, who was a son of Moitoy, and was known as the Great Warrior of Chota, was believed to have died. He was buried with his hands on his chest, holding a broadsword down his body. His daughter Neoni Ali would bury his cousin Attakullakulla. The Cherokee were a matrilineal society. Inheritance and descent went through the mother's clan. Attakullakulla's son, Dragging Canoe, led a resistance to the United States in the 1780s. His cousin, Nancy Ward, eventually was a beloved woman who had the power to free war captives. Nancy Ward continued warning Patriot soldiers of attacks, trying to prevent retaliatory raids against her people. She even sent cattle to the starving militia. Her efforts did not prevent another invasion of the Cherokee territory by the North Carolina militia, though. The North Carolina Rangers and Royal Scots joined an expedition against Cherokee settlements, which burnt several captured towns. Forces were mobilized and expeditions from Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia entered the Cherokee Nation from several directions, burning towns, destroying foodstuff, killing livestock, cutting down fruit trees, and killing the Indians. From the Virginia border to the Chattahoochee, the chain of destruction was complete and demanded further land cessions. Ward and her family were captured in the battle, but they were eventually released and returned to Chota.
Welcome back. You know, it's like I was saying in the beginning. The Overmountain boys, the Kings Mountain boys, they had a lot of involvement in the American Revolution in the North Carolina, South Carolina, Eastern Tennessee area, even to the point of slowly eliminating the Cherokee villages, the Cherokee cities. The Cherokee once spanned from Shawnee Land in northern Kentucky into southern Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. They were at one point one of the most enormous indigenous cultures on this continent. Sadly enough, with the colonization of Europeans, they needed land. And though it could have probably been done different. The elimination, the destruction, the annihilation of the already existing cultures was the only way the people at that time seen colonization possible. And for warring factions during the American Revolution, not only were they opening land up, but they were disposing of opposition. Hope you guys enjoyed this look into a little bit of the revolutionary history of Tennessee. And the destruction of a culture that's lasted millennia. Until next time, y'all take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you. God love you. We do. And we'll see you out there.